It gives me great pleasure to welcome Jane McPherson from the General Medical Council. I've met Jane when she came to talk to our trainees at South West London St George's and got to know a few tips. Besides some of the questions you asked I didn't know the answers to, well, I didn't think my answer was the right answer. So it's really quite an informative session, and we all need to be told how to keep out of trouble. So over to you, Jane.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And I hear you all had a late night, and you're all. I'll try and speak quietly then, shall I? Got some sore heads. I was watching the Rugby World Cup yesterday, and I think had they won, I would have been feeling the same way as you. I think sore head up till 3 in the morning. But yes, thank you, Zara. So I've come to talk to you today a bit about the General Medical Council with a focus on our fitness to practice type work, which is quite a dry subject for 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, but I'll do my best to keep it somewhat light-hearted and reassuring. So what I'm going to cover is, just let me get my things all sorted. I'm going to cover a little bit about how the GMC deals with fitness to practice, a little bit of myth busting, and a bit about some new reflective practice guidance that we have, and some top tips for avoiding complaints, and a bit about, if we have time at the end, about how the GMC is trying to support a profession under pressure. So my background is I've worked at the GMC for a couple of years now, and I work currently for the GMC's Regional Liaison Service. Just to explain what we are a group of mixed professionals all over the 4 countries, and we were set up primarily trying to get the GMC more in touch with doctors working on the front line. So we go out and we deliver training on GMC guidance, really with the aim of trying to help doctors become more aware of our guidance, and also with the aim of getting the GMC having a dialogue with doctors working on the front line. So that's primarily what I do, and our service is really all about trying to move the perception of this away, because we know that many doctors are quite fearful of the GMC, and these are the sorts of words that come out when we ask doctors what they think about the GMC. It's all things like headmaster, regulate, faceless. So lots of scary words, and pictures as well that people have drawn when we ask them to draw what the GMC means to them. I'm not sure if any of those ring true for you. Anybody agree with those words? I've got some nodding heads. So I suppose my role is to go out and try and be the friendly face of the GMC, if you like. So to move that scary, faceless image. And it's all part of the GMC's aim of being upstream regulation. This is a bit of a fancy slide, but basically this explains that what we're trying to do is we're trying to move more upstream, so be more of a proactive, supportive regulator, and rather than just reacting when things go wrong, trying to prevent harm and prevent things from going wrong in the first place. So my team is very much about that. We go out and we try and help doctors understand our guidance, because that's the best way that doctors are really going to stay out of trouble, is if they use our guidance and work within the guidelines that we set. And that's just a news article that explains that. Trying to switch our focus from penalising doctors when things go wrong, but to try and help them avoiding making mistakes in the first place. So that's really where the GMC is trying to work in that area now, being a more supportive, proactive regulator, and trying to make people more aware of our standards. So, with that in mind, I'm going to move on to our focus on fitness to practice. I want to sort of have a caveat that I don't work in fitness to practice, so I'm not necessarily a complete expert on everything, but I've got an awareness of most of what goes on there. So I'll do my best to answer any questions, but I don't work in that area. I'm more of a generalist, and so forgive me if I don't know all the answers to all the detailed questions that you might have. But first of all, I should explain that the GMC is, I'm sure you're aware, primarily we are a patient safety organisation, so we were set up to try and make sure that patient care is good and that doctors are able to deliver that patient care. And so our remit is really laid out in law, and if concerns are raised about doctors, we have to investigate them. So it says here, every patient should receive a high standard of care, and if serious concerns are raised, then we have a duty legally to investigate those concerns. But the most important thing to say on this slide is that what we're interested in the GMC, if we're investigating concerns about doctors, is whether they are putting the safety of patients at risk, or the public's confidence in doctors at risk. And those two things are what I'll refer to throughout the next hour. Those are the most important things. So, with that in mind, just for a little bit of light relief, we asked this is a poll that comes out every year by Ipsos Mori, where Ipsos Mori asked the general public which are the most trusted professions. And the GMC takes this quite seriously, because we're interested in whether doctors are trusted by the profession. We want to maintain that trust that doctors, that the public has with doctors. So which do you think are the 5 most trusted professions as of last year? You think doctors are on there? Okay, any others? Yeah?
No, I think so. Teachers.
Teachers are on there? Firemen's on there, is it? Okay, we'll see. Police? Nurses, okay. So doctors are number 2. Doctors are number 2, and somebody's already mentioned nurses. They pick you to the post at number 1. So this is excellent, I think, that the 2 healthcare professions there are right at the top, followed by teachers, engineers, and professors. And we like to see this. It's really important, as I've said, for the patients and the public to trust their doctors, so they keep going to see their doctor, and it benefits everybody really. So we want to maintain that profession, that level of trust that the public has in doctors. Especially when patients are seeing you at their most vulnerable times of their lives, it's really heartening that they trust you. And you've gone up quite a lot. Doctors have gone up quite a lot in the last 20 years. They used to be a little bit further down, and so they've raised their profile there. So, who do you think might be at the bottom?
Politicians. Yes, absolutely.
Politicians, yes. Any others? Journalists, I think, are on there. Yeah, we'll see. So this is the bottom. So I don't know what ad executives did last year, but they're the least trusted profession. That was the first time that they were included in the list, and they went straight to the bottom. Politicians and government ministers are so mistrusted that they have two different places there, 2 different categories. I'm sure that government ministers will be way at the bottom next year, or as for 2019 with all this Brexit nonsense, don't you think? I think so. So we definitely don't want doctors and nurses anywhere near the bottom of that list, and we know, from experience that some professions it's quite fragile, that trust, because it can break down quite quickly if sort of scandals happen, or if professions behave in a way that the public finds it a bit difficult. So it's very easy to lose that sense of trust, really. So we're glad that you're not at the bottom. So, next thing I want to do is to look at an example of a doctor. I want you to read this and just have a think about what the issues are and what you might do if you were this doctor, or how you might feel. Have a chat with your partner, your colleague next to you, and think about what you would do if a complaint was raised to the GMC based on you being Dr. Bristol. How you might feel and what you would do. Have a little chat for a second.
Get another heart attack.
I think I heard someone say, have another heart attack. Yes. Is that what I heard? Okay. All right, so I'm going to show you one of the reactions. This is a made up case study, but it has been based on something that happened in real life. I'm going to give you read another slide for you to have a quick read at, and have a think about this reaction and what you think of it. And again, chat to your colleague. And then, rather than get you to call out, I'll just get you to read the next one. And this is the second reaction. What do you think about this reaction? What do you thought? Anyone want to say which reaction they think is which reaction they would have?
The second one.
The second one, yeah. And why do you think that?
Process reflects on what's happening, needed.
Yeah.
And then you put in place, sort of a system and process, and he also appointed practice manager.
Yeah. So
he relieved a bit of his work.
Exactly. So yeah, he's reflected on it and he's recognised where he may have gone wrong, and he's put in place a plan to address the issues and move forward. So I just wanted to show you those two reactions, just to show you the sort of difference that fitness to practice panels may see when complaints are raised. And primarily what fitness to practice panels look for are these three things: insight, cooperation and remediation. So these are three important words for you to remember if ever you hopefully none of you will ever get in trouble with the GMC, but if something does go wrong or you face any kind of disciplinary process, this is the sort of thing that fitness to practice panels would like to see, rather than sort of denial or refusing to accept that something's gone wrong. It's about demonstrating insight, cooperating with the process and remediation. So sometimes, the GMC has this reputation that we are, we're punishing doctors for things go wrong, but really all we're trying to do at GMC is trying to mitigate the risk to patient safety. And if we primarily what fitness practice plans are looking at are evidence that the doctor has understood what has gone wrong and is known for it, and it's unlikely to repeat the same mistake and unlikely to have any sort of impact on patient care. So these words are really important to bear in mind. And then they can really change how the GMC will look at a complaint, depending on how the doctor reacts. And I'm going to show you a couple more cases later on, and showing you how doctors have reacted to particular complaints that have come in, and how it can really affect the decision that is made by the GMC in terms of the sanction that they may or may not receive. All right, so I'm just going to talk you through a bit more about the sort of numbers of complaints and concerns that the GMC receives every year. But first of all, just to summarise our role, if concerns are raised about a doctor, as I've said, we will investigate it if it reaches a certain threshold. And what we do is we collect and review evidence, and we will decide whether we should give the doctor some advice on how to perform next time, whether they should receive a warning, or whether some sort of restrictions should come on their practice. But for more serious concerns, we would pass them over to the Medical Practitioners Tribunal Service. And they are the body that run hearings for the GMC. So they make independent decisions about whether a doctor is fit to practice. So they would deal with the more serious things, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. And when the MPTS get involved, they can decide whether to impose restrictions, or they can decide whether to suspend a doctor's right to work, or in serious cases they can remove them from the register. So there's two different organisations there that are involved in any sort of case that we would receive. But let's ask you a question. Are the number of complaints to the GMC about doctors increasing, decreasing, or staying the same? Who thinks they are increasing? Who thinks they are decreasing? Who thinks they're staying the same? Who has no idea? Okay, so the first myth that I would like to present is complaints against doctors are rising. They are not, in fact, rising. They are going down. So this is good news. Obviously, there are always going to be concerns as it relates that we have to investigate, but we are trying to do more, as much as we can, to make the public aware of our role and what our remit is. So, in general, over the last 5 or 6 years, complaints have gone down. And just to explain this slide, as you can see, the blue section there closed immediately. The vast majority of complaints that we receive at the GMC are closed immediately because they're simply not things that we can, either not things that meet the threshold that we're interested in, or not things that is our remit to look into. People can call up and complain that the GP living next door to them keeps throwing slugs into their garden and wants to complain about that. So people make complaints about all kinds of different things that are just not within the GMC's remit. We're interested in whether a doctor is fit to practice and whether they are, impacting potentially on patient safety. So the vast majority are closed immediately. If you look at the sort of the lilac line, the second line down, that's the referred to employer. The GMC is really trying to push as many concerns raised about doctors back to their employer rather than it coming through to a GMC investigation, which can be very stressful. As where possible, we will try and make sure that any concerns that can be dealt with within by an employer, that's what happens. It's much better if it's dealt with locally at a trust level rather than coming to the GMC for a longer process. So where possible, we do that. The little purpley red line there, closed at provisional, we've introduced a new process called provisional inquiries, which aims at trying to fast track concerns or complaints that are made to us, where we feel that they're not going to end up in a full tribunal, where we feel that we can deal with them quickly, we will try and fast track them. And again, it's all about trying to make sure that we're reducing the stress or potential stress on doctors. So where possible, we will put as many through provisional inquiries as we can. It allows us to deal with things a bit more quickly. Just to give you an idea of the time scales, I'll do that on the next slide actually, but the bottom bit there, the purple bit, it says full GMC investigation. So those are the ones that are the very serious concerns that we would investigate. So you can see an idea there out of about 8,000 complaints, we might only end up with about 1,500 of them that will go through to a tribunal. This slide shows the difference between a full investigation versus provisional inquiries. So a full investigation can take many months, provisional inquiries will hopefully only take about 2 months, so it's a lot less stress for the doctor involved. So, next slide. This slide shows you the details about the source of complaints. So, we receive complaints from many different sources. As you can see, the vast majority is the general public. But as I've already mentioned, many of those are just not things that we deal with. The general public doesn't always understand what our role is. So we would close them or signpost them to other avenues if it's not something that we would look into. So as you can see, of the 5,000 complaints that we receive from the general public, we'd only really look into investigating about 9% of those, so a very small number. On the other hand, when it comes to things like employer referrals, that's because the employer has already dealt with that process, dealt with that doctor through a disciplinary process, and then if it still needs to come to the GMC, then the chances are that it's quite a serious concern and we would need to investigate that. So that's why it's about 77% of those. Similarly for police, any complaints that are raised to us by the police, then obviously we're more likely to investigate those as well due to the potential seriousness.
Can you highlight these on the self-referral?
Self-referral, yeah. So doctors will often refer themselves now to fit to practice. Normally, if they have a potential health condition that they feel that may be impacting on their ability to do their job, doctors will come forward and admit that and tell us. It's obviously something that we recommend is if the doctor has got a health concern that they fear may impact on their job, when they're able to do their job, that it's best if the doctor is honest with us and tells us and gets the support and the help that they need, rather than waiting for somebody else to complain about them because of their health condition. So this honesty about your own ability to do your job is really important, and honesty and probity is something that I'm going to mention a lot in the next few slides. Similarly, if a doctor gets into trouble with the police or gets some sort of caution, then there's an expectation that we would expect a doctor to tell us that and be honest with us as a regulator as well. So self-referral is coming up more and more actually, and I think it comes back to that openness, honesty, insight that I mentioned at the start. It always looks better if a doctor has come and told us there's a problem rather than somebody else complaining about them. Okay. All right. Bit of light relief on the next slide. This is an arrow that talks about the proportion complained about by specialties. So this is complaints pooled over 5 years And I just want you to have a guess at which specialties do you think are the most complained about? It's just for a bit of fun, really.
Surgery.
Surgery. Everybody always says surgery.
Yeah, obs and gynae.
Obs and gynae is also up there, yeah.
GP.
Spinal surgery. Surgery, yeah. Surgery is
Pediatrics.
Pediatrics, yeah. We still haven't got the top one.
GP.
GP's up there.
Psychiatry.
Psychiatrist is up there, yeah. The top one actually is very strange. It's occupational medicine. I don't know. Nobody ever gets it. It's really hard. I think probably to do with the fact that sometimes people have specific expectations about what they want from an occupational medicine doctor. Maybe they want to be signed off work, or maybe they want to be signed off work, something like that. I don't know. You may know more about that than me. Next one is psychiatry. And GP, now it's a bit of an occupational hazard, I think, being a psychiatrist and a GP, that you do get more complaints because of the amount of patients that you see. And also psychiatrists, it's probably quite difficult to, people don't like being sectioned maybe, or it's quite difficult to say when you've been cured, isn't it? But next one is obs and gynae, surgery, medicine, and it goes all the way down. Let's see if you can guess what the bottom one is. Right, there's one more at the bottom. Do you want to guess what the bottom one is? Yes, pathology. There you go. Have you seen this? It's very impressive, yeah. So there's any GPs here, just to reassure you that the GMC knows who gets most complained about, and we take that into consideration. Just because GPs and psychiatrists and occupational medicine doctors get complained about more doesn't mean to say that they're more likely to have a sanction afterwards, because everything's taken into consideration. All right, so next up, another myth. If you make a single mistake, it'll be the end of your career. The GMC, we recognise that doctors are human, people make mistakes. It's quite normal that occasionally happens. And we're not interested in punishing or penalising doctors for single mistakes that they make. The GMC is primarily interested in patterns of behaviour, persistent, serious breaches of our guidance. So this is, I hope that you're going to be reassured that when I say that it's not the end of your career if you make a single mistake. That is not what we're interested in. We want doctors on the register, and we want, provided that you show insight and you accept that something's gone wrong and you take steps to make changes to make sure that your practice is good going forward, then there usually isn't any problem. We are trying to deal with these single clinical mistakes through our provisional inquiries process that I mentioned earlier, the fast track process, trying to gather information quickly, through medical records, experts, that kind of thing, trying to assess whether there's any ongoing risk to patient safety. And if there isn't, then the chances are we won't do anything with it. For example, there was an example of a dosing error that happened. An elderly patient died as a result of a dosing error given by a doctor who made a mistake. But when it was investigated through our provisional inquiries process, the doctor had shown insight, he'd recognised what had gone wrong, he'd taken steps to make sure it didn't happen again, and it was considered that there was no current risk to patient safety, and it was closed without any further action. So it's just an example of one of the things that have gone through our process. This next slide tries to back that up really. This is the cases leading to a sanctional warning over 5 years, the least frequent. So again, the least frequent sanctions have been for clinical competence at the bottom there, 3%. So those are the ones that we're least likely to penalise doctors for, is for the clinical mistakes. On the other hand, the most frequent is up there. Now, doctors' health, that seems a bit harsh that doctors' health is up there and they're most likely to be penalised for that. But then again, that's the examples of doctors who are not getting help for their health concerns. Maybe an alcohol problem or a drug problem, and they haven't sought help and they've carried on working, and it's been found that it could potentially impact on patient care. That's when a doctor will get into trouble. We've got a couple of children at the back there. So it's about what I mentioned earlier on. It's about making sure that if you have got a health concern that you think might impact on patient safety, then please do be honest with us and get help that you need. Probity, criminality are also the main reasons why doctors get into trouble as well, and I'll explain that a little bit more on the next slide. So this is the slide where allegations have led to suspension or erasure. So this is the more serious stuff, the more serious cases that we would look into that would lead to suspension or erasure, or being struck off if you like. This is the numbers over a 5-year period. So, and you can see the most concerning is probity and criminality. So when it comes to doctors' health, that's a little bit further down. We're not likely to suspend or erase a doctor because they've got a health problem. They may get some other sort of lesser sanction. But for criminality or dishonesty, then the GMC takes that very seriously. In fact, I think it's the case that any complaint that is raised with the GMC about a doctor being dishonest will always lead to some kind of tribunal. The GMC takes it that seriously, so it's really an important characteristic that we expect doctors to have that honesty and probity. And if we find that complaints are raised about a doctor not having probity and honesty, then we do take that quite seriously. So you can see probity, criminality are the serious things. And then right at the bottom again, clinical competence are the least serious in terms of that erasure, suspension, penalty. Just to finish this little section, this is really the types of stuff that we're particularly interested in: violence, sexual assault and indecency, criminal offences, abuse of professional position, fraud or dishonesty, serious or repeated mistakes in patient care, serious health conditions that may impact on fitness to practice, and serious concerns about knowledge of English. This is the sort of things that doctors primarily get in trouble for. It's not about one-off clinical mistakes. So if you can stay away from all these, then doctors really have nothing to worry about. And this is just to give you an idea of the numbers. This is quite an old slide, it's from 2015, but it kind of breaks it all down in numbers. Out of 9,000 complaints in 2015, it led to just over 2,000 investigations. Only under 300 of those were referred to hearing, and those are the final penalties. So you can see the numbers are really big at the start and they go dramatically smaller. And again, I hope that's reassuring that the types of cases that will lead to any kind of sanction are smaller numbers and nothing like the thousands that we received to begin with. Okay, so another example of a case here. This is a foundation year doctor, if you just want to read this. Okay, so I want you to just have a quick chat with your colleague and see what you think that might have been the action that we took against this doctor. This is a true case, and again, I want to repeat to you what I said earlier about how it's quite difficult to tell what the sanction might be, because it really depends on how the doctor reacted. But have a chat with your colleague and see what you think might have happened. Anyone want to guess? Suspension. Suspension? Anybody else think anything? Warning? Nothing? Okay. All right, yeah, so it's difficult to tell, isn't it? And if I follow that up by saying to you that initially this doctor continued to maintain his lie for quite a while after it was raised that he couldn't get the leave that he wanted. He said that he booked a flight on the 29th of July, but really he booked it later. And so for quite a while he continued to maintain that lie and didn't own up to what had gone wrong. And then eventually, as time went on, he realised he was digging himself deeper and deeper into it, and he did end up with a 2-month suspension, actually. Now, and this comes down to that probity and honesty, which I've mentioned, and it also comes down to how he initially reacted when it came out. I think had he immediately admitted what he'd done, the sanction would have been less, probably, and had he continued to lie and try and get out of it, it would have been worse. Actually, what he did was he said it was the greatest mistake that he'd ever made, and he went on to try and show remediation by developing a training course for medical students on the importance honesty and probity in the medical profession. Yeah, so tried to really make amends for what he'd done. So, you know, that's why his sanction wasn't that bad, although you may think that 2 months suspension is bad, but ultimately, as I said, the GMC takes this dishonesty, probity things really seriously. Let's show you another example, which is a bit more extreme. Oh, yeah, actually, this one's another one. You can look at this one. See if you can decide what will have happened to this doctor. Actually, it's pretty obvious that it says there at the bottom that his fitness to practice is not impaired, so actually he was only given a warning. Now, what happened with this doctor was that he actually referred himself to the GMC after he received the caution, which is what we say the doctors should do. So he referred himself, he realised that he'd made this catastrophic mistake, he said, and he apologised repeatedly to the staff when he got into this fracas in a nightclub. And as part of his testimonials, he got lots of testimonials from his colleagues, and he really demonstrated insight as well, admitted what he'd done wrong, and tried to. And eventually, the tribunal believed that it was a one-off mistake, and that he was unlikely to do it again, and he'd learned from the mistake. So he only got a warning. What about this one? What do you think happened to this one? Anyone guess?
Suspended.
Erased, yeah. So this one, he was erased. Now, he also, not only did he lie about everything, but he blamed everybody else, and he showed no apology, no resource. He showed persistent lack of insight. This is what the tribunal said. No positive steps taken to remediate, failure to adhere to good medical practice, and it was persistent over a long period of time, persistent dishonesty. And so, again, that was considered to be not compatible with being a doctor, so he was struck off. Okay, so as you can see, it's difficult to tell sometimes what a sanction might be. As I've said, the important thing that the GMC is focusing on is how the doctor responded, were they open and honest, if a patient has come to harm, have they apologised, and is there evidence that the doctor has insight and reflected on what has gone wrong, and taken steps to avoid it recurring. And so this is the final slide on this section. What does that mean for doctors who have received complaints? Some concerns are so serious that we really need to do something about them. Usually it's the criminal activity. We need to do something to uphold that confidence in the medical profession. Sexual misconduct, fraud, any type of criminal activity. But in most cases, if a doctor has shown insight, we are unlikely to take action, even if harm has come to a patient, as long as it looks like there is not a likelihood of a repetition. And again, when it comes to those health concerns, we are only interested in doctors' health concerns if they potentially impact on a patient safety. If a doctor is managing their own health concern, then that is absolutely fine and there shouldn't be any problem. All right, any questions on any of that so far before I move on to reflection? No? All right, so my reflections could get me into trouble and will be used against me. This is another myth that I'm going to hopefully try and bust. Although this is a tricky one because I know doctors are quite some doctors are quite nervous about reflection. How do you all feel about reflection? What do you feel are the benefits or the risks or any concerns? Anyone want to volunteer anything? Yeah. Tick box exercise. Yes. We hear that. Any other thoughts? Mm-hmm.
I think everybody's traumatized by the Balagarba case.
Mm-hmm.
We all need to reflect in the right way.
Yes.
And obviously choose our words to,
Mm-hmm.
come across as, well-rounded people who learn positively.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're all human, and I have no doubt that we all have the patient's best interest at heart, and we are working in very challenging conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Balagarba case is the main reason for people being really mortified of reflections.
Yep. Yeah, we could. Yeah. Thank you for that. Any other thoughts? Yeah, I think we've done a lot of. The GMC's done a lot of reflection actually since the Dr. Balagarba case, as I'm sure you're aware. We understand that doctors are nervous about reflecting, and we've done a lot of work, a lot of research into. We've developed some new guidance, and as part of the new guidance, this is it, the reflective practitioner, which I'm going to talk about. Before we produced this guidance, we did quite a lot of workshops where we were hearing things about it being a tick box exercise, about it not being consistently done, about the fear of doctors being penalised because of their reflections. Also, we heard lots of things about, reflection, you only ever use it when something goes wrong. So we did quite a lot of research, and we have created this guidance, which is not just GMC guidance. It's actually guidance that we've co-created with the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges and the Medical Schools Council and the Conference of Postgraduate Medical Education Deans. So it's not just the GMC saying this, it's consistent guidance for all levels of training and education and practice. So I strongly recommend, if you haven't seen it, that you have a look at it. It's on our website. It's quite straightforward, but it does try and address some of those concerns that have been raised in terms of it being a tick box and not useful, and the fear of your reflections being used against you. The main bits of the guidance that I'll highlight for you are that we try and emphasise how to reflect and make it clear that reflective notes should focus on the learning. It's not about the full details of a case, it's about what you've learnt, how and what you're going to do to try and learn from something that's gone wrong, or do more of whatever you've been doing well. So the guidance talks a lot about this, about how to reflect. It's really important that doctors reflect in the right way and are not just regurgitating what they might have already been included on a serious incident form, for example. It's about focusing on the learning. We talk about reflection being very personal, about having time to reflect on both positive and negative. So again, there's quite a lot of tendency for doctors to reflect on only when things go wrong, but we think it's important to reflect on things that go right and try and build on the good things that you've been doing. Group reflection is something that we really recommend, and that came out in the workshops as being something that doctors really value. So we've really emphasised in the guidance that tutors and supervisors and appraisers and employers should try and support that. Now I know it's very difficult within the time constraints of your job, but that is something that we really recommend. And we also talk about how to reflect in terms of anonymising reflective notes, and because primarily that is, if you anonymise your notes, then obviously you're not going to break patient confidentiality, and ultimately you're doing it in the right way. So there's a whole section on how to anonymise your notes as well. Alongside the guidance sits all kinds of toolkits that have been created to try and help doctors understand the best way to reflect. There's various models, the what, so what, now what model, which is where you write down what you were thinking when this incident happened, how it made you feel, and what you're going to do to address the issues or to learn from whatever happened. So sometimes it's about finding the best way to structure it so that you're focusing on the learning and not just writing down all the details of what happened. There's a whole section in the guidance which talks about disclosure of reflective notes. Now, we again say that reflective notes should focus on the learning. They should not be a full discussion of the case. And the GMC reiterates in this guidance that we do not ask doctors to provide their reflective notes if we are investigating concerns about them. With the Dr. Balagaba case, there was lots of misinformation really spread on social media, and in fact Dr. Balagaba's reflective notes were not used in the case against her, and that's something we've tried to repeat time and time again, but I'm trying to get the message out there that her notes were not used against her. Her e-portfolio did not form part of the evidence before the court or the jury in the case against Dr. Balagaba. As far as the GMC is concerned, we always recommended that reflecting is really important as part of the professionalism and ongoing learning, so it's something that we really think is core to the ongoing development of doctors. And we don't ask for doctors' reflective notes, but in many cases doctors will offer their reflective notes as evidence of insight. and remediation. And in many cases, a doctor's reflective notes have led to the GMC saying, okay, we're not going to continue the investigation of this doctor because we can see that they've shown insight and that they've taken steps to address whatever failing there may be. So actually, they're used in they can be used in a very positive way, and certainly the medical defence unions and the MPS all recommend that doctors continue to reflect following the guidelines outlined in this guidance. So, any questions on that? Yes.
Yeah, and this particular case here, this doctor has been obviously quite traumatized by this experience. And if the experience has been traumatized anyway, she obviously would need a lot of rehabilitation to get back into practice again. She needs a lot of support, a lot of counseling. How is the GMC going to help her in getting back to a reasonable state of mind to practice again? I would have been devastated by this if I was in her place.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's particularly the GMC's role necessarily to support that individual doctor. I mean, there's certainly a lot of work going on with her as far as I'm aware. I'm not really sure if she's working. I think as of July she was able to work again, so I think that she was working with the BMA and other organisations to try and help get her back up to speed. We're certainly doing a lot of work to try and move forward and demonstrate how we're supporting the profession. I don't think it's really our place to sort of support individual doctors.
Did the GMC feel that they have failed this particular doctor?
Well, I think if you listen to the statements that the chief executive has made in this particular case, I don't want to, it's really hard to explain it all without going back into all the detail of it. But obviously, you're aware that she was criminally convicted. So she received a criminal conviction for gross negligence manslaughter, and that's why the GMC decided to investigate her, and that's what led to the tribunal for her. But ultimately, the legal advice that I'm trying to explain all the details of it. So what happened was, the MPTS, it went to a tribunal, and the MPTS felt that she should be given a 12-month suspension, whereas the GMC felt that because she had this conviction for gross negligence manslaughter, that she should be struck off. And because we took legal advice at the time, that they felt that that particular conviction, doctors shouldn't be on the register if they have a conviction for gross negligence manslaughter. So the legal advice we took at the time was that we should object to that, to only a suspension. We wanted her to be struck off. And then it went back and forward to various courts. I don't know whether you remember. It went back and forward to various courts. One court agreed with us, another court didn't agree with us, and then another. It went back and forward, and in the end, the final court judgment decided that that they upheld the fact that the MPTS wanted to give her a 12-month suspension. And so, we've reflected on that, and, at the time, the legal advice we took was that we were making the right decision. I think we recognise the GMC that the doctors are very angry with the GMC for taking this decision, but there's also been quite a lot of misinformation out there about what the GMC did. And ultimately, we only did what we normally do with rare cases of gross negligence manslaughter. We just felt that it was incompatible with her being a doctor.
Was it a catalogue of errors or just a single mistake?
There was lots of mistakes that happened during the particular night when the boy died. There was lots of mistakes, and what happened was it went to criminal court, and they took into consideration all the mitigating factors of the IT problems and the not having her supervisor on site, and they took into consideration all of that, and the court still found her guilty of gross negligence manslaughter. Whether that's fair or not, I don't know, but that's what the criminal court found. And so ultimately, we felt that because of that outcome, because she had that criminal conviction, we should push for her being struck off. But mainly because that's our role, is to uphold that trust between the profession and the public and make sure that doctors on the register are fit to practice. So it wasn't about trying to penalise one doctor, it was really trying to be consistent in the way we work, really, because it's a rare situation, to be fair. But we have reflected. I can see lots of hands up. Go on.
It's actually asking as well, if a student committed a crime and has a criminal record, being a medical student, what is their situation when they graduate? And I'm referring to a particular case, an Oxford student who stabbed her boyfriend, and she was reinstated at Oxford Medical School, and she's a student at the moment. They said she's a distinguished student, she's going to make a very good doctor. So what are you going to do when she comes and apply to you? Would that apply to her?
I don't know. I mean, like I said, I don't look at FTP. What will happen is when she applies to join the register, she will have to submit a declaration of fitness to practice, which obviously she will tell the GMC what she's done, and they will take into consideration whether they think she should be on the register or not. There'll be lots of discussions, I think, and they'll look into it in more detail, but I couldn't tell you what they will do. Ultimately, you know, like I said, because of what's happened in terms of the final court that overturned the original decision, we have said that in future we will not make the same decision that we made as last time, because the legal advice that we receive next time will change, because it's case law really. These cases that have come through this court change what will happen next time, because you know, that's how case law happens, isn't it? Different courts agree different things, and then it changes the way we look at things. So we constantly change according to what the laws and the courts tell us, really. Yeah.
Coming back to the Baragabwa case,
yeah.
I know this is going to be a case, people are going to discuss this for years, and the truth is going to be somewhere in the middle. Nobody's going to be able to put. The point that I'm trying to make is, well, this, with respect to the GMC, their role as a register and a role as a regulator, the moment are intertwined, and this. There are calls out there to separate these two roles, between being the register for doctors, where we pay and the regulator is run and funded by someone else. Because when the Baragabwa case came out, most of the doctors who saw what happened, they're very smart people, and they see this happening in their hospitals on a daily basis. So what is the GMC, when the GMC says that it's going to reflect, has it come out and said, it's very difficult for the GMC to come and say, well, we've made our decision, we've gone through everything, and this is what's going to happen. When you come to a very learned society of people and you say to them that, they will tend to push you away and say, well, you're in your high palaces and we don't really accept that, you're not smarter than me.
Well, all I can say is we have reflected and we are reflecting. I've been at the GMC for 2... Say again?
We need the result of your reflection.
Yeah, so this slide here I'm going to show you. I've worked at the GMC for 2 years, and I wasn't doing this role when the Baragaba case happened last year, but I know that a lot of my colleagues went out and delivered lots of sessions on Baragaba. All I see at the GMC is work going on to try and make things better. And this is an area of work that started before the Dr. Baragaba case. Supporting a profession under pressure is major work for the GMC. It started before the Dr. Baragaba case, but it's continued, and a lot of it has been ramped up as a result of that. Just to give you a quick sort of run through this is some of the work that we're doing. The reflective practice stuff, it's really important that we make it clear what we expect. So the reflective practice guidance is part of this, trying to support doctors in understanding how to reflect safely. There's been a whole medical manslaughter review based on the Dr. Baragaba case, and we're taking into consideration the results of that. There's been actions for the GMC and actions for other people as well, so we are taking those very seriously. The induction and returners work is really a big part of a really important piece of work that links in with Dr. Baragaba, because one of the issues with her was that she hadn't received a proper induction following her maternity leave. So we're developing a lot of work on trying to work with employers to make sure that doctors who are returning to work after a period of absence are getting proper induction. Human factors training, that is all part of the GMC's move to try and make fitness to practice processes less stressful for doctors. So all of the FTP staff that work in the GMC are going through human factors training to try and make sure they understand how to link up and engage better with doctors, understanding the stresses that fitness to practice can be for a doctor. Raising and acting on concerns. One of the issues with Dr. Baragaba case was that she had criticism that she didn't raise concerns early enough, and had she raised a concern and really demanded a help, then it may not have led to that outcome. So we've got a lot of work going on where we're linking up with other regulators, trying to develop a sort of protocol so that concerns are raised earlier, so that patient safety problems don't happen. So there's always constant work going on about raising and acting on concerns. Well-being in the medical profession. There's a lot of work going on as well where we're trying to think about doctors' well-being. We produce a report every year called the State of Medical Education and Practice, which really highlights where we think the risks are and the problems are for doctors, and it's a call for action as well. As a regulator, there's only certain things we can do, but we work with everybody, other employers and other bodies to try and support doctors always. And the top one is one that I particularly wanted to highlight that may be of interest to you is fairness. We have done some research into why BME doctors are disproportionately referred to disciplinary processes more than white doctors, and why non-UK graduates are referred to the GMC by employers more than UK graduates. So there's lots of work going on. You can see this report actually now, it's on our website, but basically the fairness, the fair to refer piece of work talks about some bits up there, but basically it highlights that this research that we've done highlights that doctors who often come from other countries get inadequate support in transitioning to their new environment. Often their working patterns can leave them quite isolated, and lots of times they don't feel like they've got a link into leadership at the trusts where they work, so they have inaccessible leadership. There's a lot of times BME doctors and non-UK graduate doctors feel that they don't get a proper appraisal or feedback on their work, which can lead to problems for them. And often they feel that they're outsiders. There's lots of, you read the research on our website. We've done this research to try and understand why doctors are referred to as more, and we've come up with a lot of recommendations as to how to fix this problem or try and address these issues. That's something that we're going to try and take forward as well, making sure that our processes are fair. So in answer to your question, there's so much work going on. All I hear at the GMC is just work going on to try and support doctors in any way we can, because ultimately we feel that the best way to protect patient care, which is what our role is to support doctors so they can deliver patient care. So, I mean, that is definitely the way we've reflected, the way we continue to reflect.
You're just like a doctor's career. You do a lot of good things, but one mistake can really turn you around. You're in the same position.
Yeah, well, that's interesting.
You're doing a lot of great work.
Yeah.
But one or two mistakes can affect people's lives and their perception of doctors and the public in the wrong way that will take many years to fix.
It's an interesting analogy, and you're probably right there. Yeah, it is. It's a shame that all the good work that the GMC is doing has been ruined by this one incident. And you're right, but it's happened, and we are trying to learn from it and move on. My role is basically to go out there and try and help change that perception and try and make doctors aware of what the GMC expects. Yeah.
May I just ask?
Yeah.
Suppose a doctor has been referred after referral to the GMC and he just ended retraining
or certain undertakings. Does the GMC help in assigning him or allocating him in a center where he can undertake these undertakings? Do you have centers that you are registered centers with you that you refer doctors to? Or do you expect the doctor to go himself and look for somebody that can accommodate him? He might not get it.
Do you mean if they receive a sanction of undertakings or conditions? Is that what you meant?
Yes, yeah.
Well, normally if they have some sort of condition or undertaking, normally it's some sort of extra training or some sort of supervision, and that would be done through the employer mainly, I think, really. It's not something the GMC we wouldn't have a centre in like that, but we would link up quite closely with the employer. We actually have a sister service called the Employer Liaison Service, and one of my colleagues links up with a responsible officer at trusts, and they talk about particular doctors that may be facing disciplinary problems, and there's the support there. But I think that's really all I can say.
And if the doctor hasn't got a permanent employer, say a locum,
They still have a responsible officer. They'd still have to have an appraisal and go through a they need some sort of designated body and responsible officer, even if it's a locum agency, for example. And again, my colleagues in the employee liaison service link up with responsible officers all over the country who look after all the doctors.
yeah. Thank you.
Yep. Any question?
Just a comment, really.
Yes.
This ongoing saga of our government. I think the main concern, and it still remains a concern until the GMC comes and talks to every doctor about how everything went on. The main issue is you're trying to say that this doctor has committed this mistake by herself, like not being in an NHS hospital. And she has lots of people working with her, including supervisors, including nurses, and so forth. And the case, actually, if you read it, it's not like something that happened in just 1 minute. It's all the events that are leading to this. I think what I would classify as manslaughter is not such a case which happens in an NHS hospital. You can talk about the Michael Jackson case, for instance, that was treated privately. That is one single mistake. But you cannot talk about the case and trying to tell us that she is the one that she's committed the mistake and then she needs to be convicted. This is basically, what you call a scapegoat.
I understand.
It's a culture in the NHS.
I understand, but you understand that that wasn't the GMC's decision. You understand that, don't you? That was a criminal conviction. That's nothing to do with the GMC, I'm afraid. The GMC only got involved after the doctor received the criminal conviction for gross negligence manslaughter. Now, whether she should have received that or not, there's been definitely lots of conversation. The medical manslaughter review that I mentioned is looking into that further, whether she should have received that conviction. We may hold a view on that, but actually she was convicted in a criminal court for that, and they took into consideration all the systems failings, all the things that were happening around the time of the evening of the boy dying. They took into consideration all of that, and they still convicted her. Whether that's fair, I don't necessarily think it's fair, but that's what happened. And so the GMC's role, we weren't judging her on what happened. We were literally looking at the case where she had a conviction for gross negligence manslaughter, and we felt that the only course that we should take was that she shouldn't be on the register, because that's what we felt was the right thing to do to uphold the trust in the profession. Lots of patients felt that was the right decision. They don't want a doctor with gross negligence manslaughter on the register. Doctors don't agree with us, but that's what patients might agree with us.
The GMC at some stage changed their decision.
The GMC what, sorry?
At some stage changed their decision, didn't they? The question is why?
No, we didn't make...
I think it's because of the two bodies, the GMC and the tribunal.
Yeah, what happened was the MPTS took it to the tribunal. We recommended that she should be struck off, and the MPTS said, no, let's just give her a 12-month suspension. But we felt that by doing that, they had revisited the results of the original court case and come to their own less serious verdict. And we felt that they looked at all the mitigating factors of the system pressures and that they'd come to their own lesser verdict. And we didn't think that was lawful. We felt that they were acting unlawfully in going behind the original conviction and saying, no, it's not that bad, let's only give her a 12-month suspension. So the legal advice at the time that we got was that wasn't sufficient and that they shouldn't revisit the original court case findings and come to a less serious result. The first court case that happened where we appealed it, they agreed with us. The second one, they didn't agree with us. So, and this is what I was talking about case law, it changes as time goes on. Because the second court ruled that the MPTS could look at the original system failings and come to a less serious verdict, we were like, okay, well that's not the legal advice that we received. So going forward in future, we won't make the same decision because the legal advice we receive will be different next time. Do you see what I mean? So it's quite complicated and quite legal, but it really wasn't about the GMC being responsible for her being convicted of gross negligence manslaughter. It has nothing to do with the GMC. It's only later that we got involved, and But it's a back and forward, complicated case. Yeah.
Sorry, Jane. I know we've put you on the spot with this, but I think it's raised lots of concerns. It's quite emotive.
And I think what you said there about the GMC should go and speak to every single doctor and explain it. That's what we want to do, but unfortunately, there's only one of us in each region, and we haven't got the capacity to do that. But we are trying to get the message out, and there's lots of information on our website that explains why we took the decisions that we took, and we've been really open and honest about why we made the decisions we made, and why we did what we did, and what we're doing now to try and rebuild trust with the profession, because we know we have to. So, yeah, it's a long road ahead.
Final 3 questions very briefly, Sarah.
I do apologise for opening a can of worms about the
No,
case.
it's fine. Don't worry, I knew it was coming.
Just one small question that doesn't involve this poor doctor directly. What happened regarding her consultant that day? Because we've been hearing myths as well, that he fled UK back to his country so that he doesn't get penalized, and to wash his hands from the responsibility of the case. Just, moving forward, learning from lessons as well. Is this the case, and is he ever going to be questioned about this?
I honestly don't know. I don't know whether it's ever been proven that he fled the country, but certainly he now works in Ireland, and I think that we don't have any the GMC has no remit over him. So, that'll come up in the criminal courts. He was part of the criminal court case. It was all, his defence or his input was looked at in the court as well, the original court case, and even despite that, she still got the conviction. So.
Thank you. Final question.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Shanda. I'm a GP in East London. I just want to move away a bit from the Barber case and bring this back to general practice. So basically, as a GP, we are at high risk of having complaints. My question was about the GMC being a register versus being a regulator at the same time. So basically, we pay annual fees to the GMC. The GMC is meant to protect us as doctors. Now, with regards to complaints from patients, our current complaints policy is patients can complain locally to a practice. That can be raised into NHSE England. Then, if it's not resolved appropriately, it goes to the Ombudsman. Now, the issue is that when patients come and complain directly to the GMC, albeit any form of complaint, as you had mentioned earlier. Now, when these are looked at, whether they go to a tribunal service or not, the way the feedback comes back to basically all our network members, CCG members, everyone is aware that this complaint has been made against a so-and-so doctor. And to be honest, that is just very troubling as a doctor. I mean, for anyone to submit a complaint to the GMC, all my colleagues in my CCG need to find out about it. It's not really...
As far as I'm aware, complaints are confidential unless they go to the tribunal. So if they go to a tribunal, it's in the public domain. So,
can there not be some form of regulation? So as general practitioners, can these complaints come in through NHSE England, through that process, and then go into the GMC? Why must the GMC be the first point of contact here?
I think we only look into complaints about specific doctors. NHS England will be doing something different. Ours is about specific complaints about a doctor's practice, and that's our role. But we wouldn't. It's all confidential unless it ends up at a tribunal, in which case it's in the public domain on the website, and in the same way that other court cases are. But doctors, complaints about individual doctors, legally it's our remit, so that's why we look at them. If cases come into us where it's not our remit, then we would signpost people elsewhere to other bodies. But complaints about specific doctors, it comes to the GMC. Yeah.
Final question with Green here.
This lady over here. Hold a second, the lady over here, yeah.
I've got a general comment just from an outsider's perspective looking in. So in its simplest form from this dialogue today, my perception is that the GMC is acting as regulator but then as supporter, or wants to play two roles, and those two roles in effect, in broad terms, create some conflict. And as I see it, that conflict then creates an element of mistrust with doctors.
I mean, our role is not to protect doctors, it's to protect patient safety. But we believe the best way to do that is to try and support doctors to deliver good care for patients.
Right. Do you think that there's an opportunity to carry out a whole piece of work on engaging with doctors to build that trust? Yeah, I agree, but developing further into, for example, in various conversations with doctors here today, they have some concerns over, for instance, the ability to gain access to training, as a priority training goes to UK doctors, EU doctors. So is there an angle where that support, that trust can be built by finding out what it is that the gaps that these doctors need, and then the GMC fills that gaps, in that space?
I think, if I understand you correctly, I mean, in terms of, there's lots of work going on to try and support doctors who are maybe SAS doctors or trust grade doctors. I don't know whether you're aware there was a recent survey of SAS and SASM-led doctors at the GMC, and some outcomes will come from that with lots of recommendations. So there's lots of work going on to try and support this group of doctors that may not be in training posts. For example, we also do a Welcome to UK Practice workshop for all doctors who are new to the UK. So there's lots of work going on to try and support and fill those gaps. And I think the problem for us, I think, is just getting that message out there. And that's really difficult because we've got so much stuff on our website, so many, we've got news things that come out, we've got surveys galore. Obviously, we send out information through the responsible officers about what's going on. There's an awful lot of work going on that the GMC is doing, and I think part of my role is to go out and try and spread that awareness. But obviously, there's a lot of doctors. There's over 300,000 doctors, and getting through to everybody is difficult. But in answer to your question, we are really aware of the difficulties that some cohorts of doctors face, and we are making recommendations for us and for others to try and help support that group. But just getting that message out there.
Thank you very much, Jane, for your patience.
Thank you so much.
Can I just say something? Because a lot of queries are directed to Jane as in expectations of the GMC to support doctors. It's Health Education England who does that support through advice given by investigations that were done through General Counsel. So with the Bawagaba case, there's now, we talked earlier about supporting trainees get back into work. There's champions in each trust. That's a piece of work that's been done by Health Education England, supporting trainees who are going through difficulties, emotional difficulties, PHP, professional support unit, again, Health Education England. So there is a lot of work in support coming through other organisations, Health Education England, NHS England as well, and local trusts. I am aware of your point earlier about locums being particularly vulnerable. But again, like Jen did say, they do have the responsible officer. They do have to go through the process of appraisal and revalidation. So it's about just making sure that people are linked with these processes that are supportive as well. Amfarouk, you wanted to mention something, a comment?
Okay. No, I was thinking about it, that's okay.
I gather that there are over 8,000 vacant posts in medicine in this country. In the Sudan, I believe we have over 8,000 unemployed doctors. Is there any way, I know it's the job of the medical union here in the Sudan to provide induction courses for these boys or girls and to really to improve their communication in English. Is there any way the GMC, together with our medical union, find a way of importing all these unemployed doctors in the Sudan?
I wish there were. I mean, it's not really our remit, but I'm sure we'd love to do that. But, like I said, if you look at our stated medical education practice report that'll come out soon, we highlight always the workforce issues and the doctors that are under pressure, and we do, want there to be more, the number of overseas doctors is growing all the time. It's constantly growing. We've got more overseas doctors now than ever before, and that is a good thing. We're definitely promoting that, but I don't know whether we can actually do a direct Sudanese exchange. So that'd be great, though.
That'd be great. Thank you very much, Dave. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you very much.